If you want a great surface to paint on and you don't have the time to set up a canvas and you don't want to pay for expensive airbrush paper, making your own is a great option. This paper is very durable, it's archival, you can erase and you can also scratch into it. My favorite paper for drawing and painting is Arch watercolor paper. You could use any paper you like, but you want to make sure it has 3 things. Number 1 is smooth, hot-pressed paper. You don't want cold-pressed or rough-pressed. Number 2, you want to make sure your paper is 100% cotton. This is very important. And number 3 is a heavy paper, so 140 pounds or more. In order for us to use erasing and scratching techniques, we're going to need a surface that's water-resistant, so we're going to seal it with gesso. You could use any size paper you'd like. First thing you need is a roller or a large brush to apply the gesso on the paper. You're also going to need a tool to remove the gesso. I prefer to use a taping knife because this cleanly pulls the gesso off the paper. If you don't have these, you could use a squeegee or you could even use an old credit card to remove it. Any brand of acrylic gesso will work just fine for this. My favorite brand is Liquitex. This technique only requires 2 coats of gesso, and after that you'll have a perfect surface to airbrush on. First thing you need to do is lay your paper on a flat surface and then apply a good amount of gesso to cover the whole page. You don't have to worry about applying too much because you're going to be removing this anyway. Once the first coat is applied, I like to place my roller in a Ziploc bag so it doesn't dry up. Step number 2 is to remove the gesso with the taping knife, and if you have a large one you could do this in one pass. Don't worry if the gesso didn't cover the whole page because we're going to be applying a second coat in about 20 minutes. Cotton paper, which used to be called rag paper, is extremely durable and has no problem holding gesso. In about 20 minutes to a half hour, you're going to do the exact same thing. 1 coat of gesso and then remove it. You want to let this dry and cure for 24 hours, and after that you're ready to paint. The next day, if you notice that there's some imperfections in the gesso, you could lightly wet sand it, but this step's completely optional. Using distilled water and a 120 grit sanding block, I could lightly wet sand this and then remove any of the excess water or slurry from the gesso with my taping knife. Any excess water could be cleaned up with a paper towel or a microfiber cloth. Since the paper expands when you add the gesso to it, you're going to notice that there's a few buckles or folds in it. This is completely normal and very easy to fix. The easiest way is to use some painter's tape and stretch the paper on any smooth surface. You can use a table or you can use a drawing board. This way your paper will be completely flat when you paint. Another option is that you can iron the paper with the gesso side down. Since we're working with 100% cotton, this paper has no problem being ironed, but this step really isn't necessary. But it's a quick and easy option to make your paper completely flat. From here you'll have an amazing surface to work on. It's easy to make and it's inexpensive. The gesso seals the paper and makes it impervious to water and paint. This way you can erase into it and you could scratch off the paint for all sorts of airbrushing techniques. Without gesso, the paint gets absorbed into the fibers of the paper and it's nearly impossible to remove or erase out. And one of my favorite things about a paper that you make like this is that if there's any mistakes, you can remove the paint right off using some 4012 reducer or some Windex. And in about 10 seconds, you're back to a fresh, clean piece of airbrush paper. I prefer this to any other paper on the market, so give it a shot. Thanks so much for watching.